Good evening to all our viewers on YouTube, and thank you for joining us this evening. I have the privilege of introducing our speaker tonight. It's with me, and my name is Sharlene Parasnath. I am a hematologist that works at Al-Platuli Hospital in Durban, and my experience is that I have 4 children. And so this evening we have Dr. Usha Vasthare, who is a neuroscientist, teacher, writer, and social worker. She's the co-founder of the Yogakshema Rehabilitation and Wellness Center, and she has facilitated over 1,000 support group meetings at Yogakshema and conducted numerous workshops on mind training, mindful living, healthy living, overcoming automatic negative thoughts, forgiveness, improving interpersonal relationships, depression, stress management, and various other topics. So today we will be talking about mindful parenting. So good evening, Dr. Vasthare.
Good evening and namaste.
Namaste. So the role of a parent is by far the most important. However, when compared to our professional responsibilities, which come with defined sets of responsibilities, job descriptions, as parents, there's no recipe book, there's no SOP. So obviously, we often question ourselves as parents. And so today I'll be asking you a few questions which hopefully you can help us maneuver through life as parents. So the first one I have is on education. So the world is changing at a rapid pace with information overload in the form of the internet. The way education is delivered now has changed. And as parents, we may sometimes have expectations that our children should learn the way we did 20 and 30 years ago. So how do you think we can mindfully navigate this whilst trying to guide our children? We are set in our ways of doing things.
It's a great question, Sharlene. It's all about learning, as you said, as parents. How do we educate the kids? Before we get to how, let's go to the why. Why should we help the kids learn to a certain extent, certain level? It reminds me of how our parents and what our parents said to us with respect to education, At least I can speak for my own self, for my generation. You should tell me how it was in this country, in this culture, in your generation, many generations apart. Especially in Indian families, the way our generation, our parents, the way they said why education is important, I'm going to explain through a cartoon. Just imagine this. It's like a thought experiment, and then imagine a mother showing the kid a beggar on the street. And the mother says, you know what? If you don't study, you will end up like him. This is how, in our generation and previous to this, we were told, as kids. And then, of course, that was very powerful. We certainly did not want to end up like that, and we wanted to be better than our parents, at least with how they lived and everything. That was enough for us. However, in this day and age, and especially looking parenting through the eyes of mindfulness, I would like to change that cartoon in this way to understand what mindful parenting is all about. The same scenario, mother showing the kid, the beggar on the street, and says, you know what? You have to study well, and you have to study so well that there won't be any beggars on the street. Such a huge difference in the way we are looking at it. So I always say, when we change the way we look at things, the things we look at will change. So if we change our perception about parenting in this way, everything will fall in place. It is not just how do we do it? It's all about why. Especially when it comes to science, why is important, and how do we do things. There can be many different ways, you know. So let us start off with this, then it will set the pace for the rest of our discussion today. After this, one thing I would like to add on to this is the present parents, they try to bring in the values that they were brought up with, right? Rightly so. The values are important, but how do we educate the kids about the values? That is what has to change. Many of the parents don't think about how we should inculcate the values. They carry on with the same way their parents taught the values. But as they say, the values are not taught but caught. So we have to keep this in mind, whether it's about education as a value or anything else as a value. If we take, I think again, the way we are living is different than the way our parents lived. So we need to inculcate the values in different ways than our parents have done. The values including the education.
It's an important thing you bring up about the values we've been brought up with, and talking about the generational cycle. So breaking that generational cycle, especially so in the Indian community, where in some instances patriarchy is still enforced, or expecting their children to be seen and not heard. And what would you say to these parents when it's important that their children are able to express feelings and emotions in a safe place? Something the previous generations may not have been comfortable with, giving the child some agency to be able to, So how would you advise parents to be able to step back and not react, or scold them for speaking their mind, because it's been enforced, as I said, you have to be a certain way as a child.
Yeah. I think there are certain words that you used. I'm going to hold on to those and then try and see how we can do this. First is enforced, and then lot of times as parents we use the word discipline. This, especially discipline for our generation, it was a beautiful thing to feel that we were highly disciplined individuals, having traveled so many different countries and gone through many different continents and through various cultures. What I have understood from the youngsters today, in this day and age, they do not like the word discipline. They say it's D word and they run off. They even say that D word for discipline. So I'm trying to come up with various different words to use rather than discipline. I try and, depending on the age of the kids, I use different words like regulation, self-regulation, rather than disciplining. And that they're able to both tolerate and accept better. So this is what I mean. With parenting today, we have a lot of challenges, Sharlene, but at the same time, there are a lot of opportunities also for parents. So again, we need to change the way we are looking at parenting itself. Rather than feeling, oh, we need to bring up the kids, we need to do this and that for the kids, whether it is emotionally, physically, all of bringing them up, helping them grow, we have to come out of that view and say, I need to learn as a parent, learn how to do parenting, and not just learn how to do parenting, but also learn from the kids. The biggest challenge for parents in this day and age is parents are also learning as much as the children. In fact, the children are quite far ahead than the parents, especially with respect to technology. And especially with respect to many of the things related to technology and the social media, kids are far ahead than the parents. This I see is the biggest challenge for parents. And the kids also see that, especially as teenagers, they see that. So I'm not saying that parents have to be competing with kids so that they have to be ahead of the kids with all of that. But parents have to be educated about the pitfalls of the technology and the benefits of technology. They have to be fully aware of what is misinformation, what is disinformation with respect to technology, so that they can be ahead of the kids, so that they will be able to educate the kids from this respect. So, two things. As parents, we need to be on top of things, especially with respect to technology. Otherwise, certain age, kids of certain age, they truly disrespect the elders only because they think they do not know enough about life itself. The kids today, everything revolves around technology, and we cannot say that's too much, I don't want to be using, but at the same time spend so much time on this, on the technology itself. So we really need to be ahead. We as parents, we as grandparents need to understand the technology from a different perspective so that we can help out the kids also. So we need to learn to help the kids, and we need to learn from the kids. There is nothing wrong learning about the technology from the kids also. That will also help the kids, and that will be a great bonding time with the kids. And through the technology, we can help the kids through parenting.
So, and the next question I have is, when you have parents with differing parenting ideologies, because you've come from a home where you were brought up in a certain way with different values, and your spouse may have been brought up in a different home. You're coming from two different backgrounds, and when there's a clash, when you're trying to enforce your way of parenting, the way your parent have parented you, and your husband is so that creates a lot of, I mean, I've chatted with my own friends in preparing for this talk, and I think we all have similar sort of challenges, and how would you address that?
You're absolutely right. This is the biggest challenge. I will bring in little bit of my example, of course, long time back, several decades back, but still this will give some kind of an angle for you to see how in many different cultures parents are facing similar issues. For me, it was not only having different values with the spouse, also bringing up the child in a different culture itself. I was brought up in a culture with certain values, and this is true for not just for me, for any value that that is important for them. So it's not just between husband and wife. The values will differ as we grow older. And I always say there is no right or wrong with values, you know. How we use it and is kind of important. And so we need to prioritize and have a very good understanding between parents beforehand. So coming back, the challenge I had was brought up in one culture with different values between the parents or between the spouses, and bringing up the child in a different value. So I took it as a way, not just as a challenge, but as a way for me to grow through this. So I focused as much as I was focusing on my daughter, I was focusing on myself. How can I grow as a parent as I am bringing up my child? If I were to use that word rather than just grow, I would now use the word evolve, you know. How can we evolve as parents as we help our kids grow? Again, making a shift, a paradigm shift in the way we are looking at parenting. This has to happen, Sharlene. Whichever country we are, whichever culture we are trying to raise our kids, and I have friends and in the family, spouses belonging to totally different faiths and religions and cultures and whatnot. So rather than thinking parenting is becoming a challenge, if you again make a shift and then say, we have to grow as parents as we bring up the kids, then it becomes a beautiful experience. But especially with respect to values, this is very important. We should not give mixed messages to the kids. Yes, the spouses will have different values, but before even we have the child, see, we prepare before the child comes into home, before the baby is born, we prepare the room or the child room, and then we have so much of an issue. What color paint do we use? Is it blue or is it pink? If it's the same culture, this is how it is in West, you know. Yes. And then should it be neutral if we do not know what gender the baby is? We think so much about all of this, trying to bring in the furniture to the baby room and how to decorate. As much as we prepare, and then how joyous time it is, as much as we prepare at this level, we need to prepare as parents. How are we going to bring the children from the level of when it's an infant, a baby, an infant, and children of all different ages? Because the values we need to bring up with should change from one stage to another. We cannot have the same values, the standard values that we were brought up with. Do not lie. No, and you always have to speak the truth. You always have to be kind. You should never ever feel jealous about others, especially with your siblings. Always looking at just right or wrong issues, right? We need to grow from that stage, and as parents, we need to prepare ourselves. All of this is correct, but how in this day and age, just looking at parenting from a binary format, right or wrong, black or white, will not cut it, Sharlene. This is where we need to look at parenthood as a privilege and not as a duty that we need to help kids grow, you know. Then when we make this paradigm shift, then parenthood becomes a beautiful experience.
An important thing you just spoken about, jealousy, because I've experienced it with my own children. Like, you know, they have friends in school and it becomes something that that person might have that they don't have, be it in their ability to perform in school or whatever it is. And I think it's important for us to be able to make them analyze the situation, and make them see that it's, what is it about yourself that, you could do differently. And maybe that child does not have everything you have. And the thing that you're looking in that child, is that the most important, value in life, So, I mean, oftentimes I'm also faced with that, speaking to my own children, trying to make them understand that perhaps they overthinking certain things, and perhaps look at it in a different way,
So true, Sharlene. You brought up jealousy. Before I address that, when I interact with young parents, your generation and younger generation, when I go to different countries, they are realizing all of this. And especially in West, I see some of the old values is coming back. I don't know how much time the parents spend in this country inculcating values. But jealousy is like a value. We need to look at it as a value rather than as a moralistic view. When we look at it as moral, then it is two ways. It's either right or wrong. However, when we look at it as a value, there are different ways of making the kid understand. So one of the culture that is coming up with the younger generation, at least again with my own daughter, how she's raising her kids in West, and many of my nieces and nephews in West, the aspect of storytelling is coming back. And it was kind of lost somewhere in the middle, I know, as I was raising my daughter. But the parents who held on to the importance of storytelling. Now I can even bring in the neuroscience perspective for that. The brain is wired to understand through stories. We don't realize that. So through stories, especially at a younger age, when we inculcate, it has such a great impact on the kid's mind. And it's also a beautiful way of interacting with the kids, and it becomes a bonding time between parents and kids. So jealousy, it can be dealt with many different ways rather than do's and don'ts. That's how I was brought up with. Oh, that is not right. You should not. Whenever we say should not, many a times, should not is always associated with guilt. When we become adults, if we do something that should not be done, these are the words, right? We have heard from our parents. When we try to do that should not, then that association of guilt comes about. So what do? We hide. And we don't say that, even if it is happening inside. This is what I see with younger generation like you. And then when I talk to them, it's not about should not. These are normal emotions, normal feelings that come about. What we do with that, what makes the difference. Just saying that, this I'm talking about adults, not even children, People have come to me as adults. I know I'm going through so much jealousy. I cannot bear it. I need to know how I can come out. I have been helping several people with that, especially with sibling rivalry turns into sibling jealousy when they become adults, So telling the kids, not that it is right or wrong, what happens when we feel jealous is the way to bring up the kids rather than do's and don'ts. And I always say, rather than saying not to feel jealous because it won't feel good, we can go the opposite way. The opposite of jealousy, Sharlene, is, I'll use the Sanskrit word and then tell you the translation of that. is called mudita in Sanskrit. That means to feel good about others, about somebody else, if they have something more, if they are brighter, if they are more intelligent, to be happy for others, to be happy with others is extremely important. As parents, if we can inculcate how to be happy with others, how to be happy for others, the kids will not know. As parents, we need to do this so that the kids can follow, rather than saying, no, feel that this will not do good for you. We need to go the positive approach, bring the kids to be happy. And how can that happen, especially in this day and age? We hardly have one kid, or as some people say, 1.5 kids. It's one or two kids these days. And it's so hard. Many a times it's a single kid, And then how do we teach that kid about sharing? Jealousy is also about when we share things with others, feeling jealous about others will go away. Rather than saying, if the other person has more, our children will have something more than somebody else, and that we need to make them share, starting with material things like toys and different things, and then talk to them about the values that they are brought up with, and to share those values with others. I think that is the way to go.
I think that way you'll be creating empathy and kindness, and that in your children. It's important to talk to them about what they are feeling.
Absolutely.
So I just want to shift the gears a bit, because as I said, there were questions that I had gotten from many people, and more difficult situations like living in abusive relationships, be it physical or emotional abuse, and things like a spouse having maybe a personality or mental health problem, and the person not willing to identify that they need help and go for the help, and here you're in a struggle trying to parent these children in this very toxic, if you call it a toxic situation, because the children are seeing these arguments or the violence or the emotional abuse or whatever it is. And how do we deal with that difficult situation?
It's not even a tough situation, it's also a tough question. There are so many angles to this, Sharlene. It's a shame. In this day and age, it's usually nuclear families. But especially if it's a toxic situation within the family, again, one spouse having certain mental health issues, it becomes really tough. And if that person is not ready to get help from others, in earlier days, we always had grandparents, parents from both the sides to support even parenting. That's why I was suggesting people even to have talks like this, interaction for grandparenting issues too. That's a separate issue altogether. But now we are raising the kids in a nuclear family. And so it was for me too, but somehow we need to make it a point, even though we don't have grandparents living with us, to be constantly associated with grandparents and to be associated with either other elders in the community itself or friends who are a little bit older than us or who have kids older than us, to be associated with them is the way I truly feel. More and more I see, in Western countries, and it's also happening in India, which is a shame. But we need to be aware of these things. Yes, you get a lot more freedom to raise the kids if it's a nuclear family, but at the same time, a lot more challenges, and the kids are also losing out, and the parents are losing out that they don't realize. So the social intelligence is as important as emotional intelligence. We know about the cognitive intelligence part and the emotional intelligence part. The social intelligence aspect is extremely important. As parents, we are losing out because of the quote unquote busyness of our work. These days, when both the parents are working outside the home, there is no time to socialize. Socializing is such an important issue. Socializing, not the way we think of, just to go have parties Friday evenings and Saturday mornings and then have Monday morning blues. Now, I'm not talking about that. This is what is happening in West. Parents of similar values and similar intellectual capability, they are having their own circles, their own groups, so that they are, the parents with the kids, they are trying to bring the kids together. In fact, they even do it in a structured and organized way to send their kids to other parents' homes, so that the kids will play with them and also learn the values from the other families. And this happens either just even one another family is enough, 2 or 3 other families is enough. But I can assure you, this is a lot more work. This is the way to do it. And I know this is how I did it too, because I was raising my daughter in a different culture without the close association of grandparents and others. So we need to reinvent and think out of the box about parenting and reinvent many tools and techniques to be able to come up with that. Yes, it means a lot more work, but we need to embrace parenthood, then it won't feel like a lot more work.
So the one question you brought about the working parents, I think that previously mothers were stay-at-home mothers. I think children of my generation, still many of the mothers still stayed at home and fathers provided. However, some husbands currently have the same expectations of their wives, even though their wives are working a full job and coming back home and tending to the home. And it leads to conflict in the relationship, and the children then are seeing this. So how do you mindfully bring up children in this situation so that you set an example for their relationships, because you don't want this now to be to carry on into the next generation, that this is sort of how we do it?
Yeah, tough issue and a tough question. Luckily, I'm not talking through experience, because I didn't have that kind of an issue. And also in West, even in my generation, both the parents worked, and there were very few parents who did not want to work for different reasons, and they were happy staying at home. But still, in Western culture, whether the mother worked or not, at least I'm talking about in Indian families, they were quite, how would I say, open-minded enough to share even the chores at home between husband and wife. So, especially in this culture, this is a very interesting culture. This is my fourth time here in this country. What I see is a beautiful admixture of Indian culture and Western culture. When I just look at the society, look at many things, including transportation, vehicles, the homes, the way homes are built and everything is very, very Western. And when you look at the Indians, yes, they are quite Western in certain issues, no doubt about it. But I also see in certain other issues, I'm saying as though I'm part of here, I'm not making any judgment, please don't take me wrong. I see as women raised in this culture, somehow it's not even the men, it's the women who are quite behind. Many times, this is what I have seen many women, and then not all of them, some of them, they like to do it certain ways. They don't allow the men to take part, So it is not about blaming men. I think women need to be empowered rather than blaming men. If we feel this way, we are still in the victim mode. We need to come out of the victim mode and feel so empowered so that anything will be shared between husband and wife. This is what I would like to see it happening in this culture. And I have seen in many of the young families like yours, I have seen, but my generation, I can compare others with my generation. Many of the people, we are still, my generation, women, we feel that we are in the victim state of mind still. And without our knowledge, it gets inculcated to the younger generation. The younger generation get that mixed messages from their parents. This is where we need to really think out of the box. And then there has to be a dialogue. There has to be open communication. There has to be discussions cross generation, not even cross culture, cross generation, intergenerational discussions have to happen in this society. So people my generation will learn and broaden their views, and I'm saying kids, like you, parents of your generation can balance both your kids and your parents. You're caught between the two generations, at least your generation. So there has to be a dialogue, an intergenerational dialogue. That is where I think.
So, as you're talking, one of my colleagues sent a question, and she's a young mom, and she wanted some tips. And she says, as a working mom, you have to you have many roles but you tend to neglect yourself. And how do you?
Yes, don't we all do that? Irrespective, even now, I'm sure you do that too, many a times. This is what mothers are. However, we really need to know, instead of saying anything, I will just give an analogy and then it will strike a bell. About the oxygen mask safety. When we travel in planes, they say, put the oxygen mask first before you help your child. It is the same way. If we neglect our own health, physical health, mental health, spiritual health, we are not saving time and giving that time to our kids. Our belief system has to change. Our yardstick has to change. As mothers, I've also done that mistake. But as I was doing, I was also realizing I tried to. That is also where I tried to get help when I couldn't do it myself. That is where the spouse being understanding really, really helps than anything else, for that matter. So, we are not saving time by neglecting ourselves, and even if we give that time, it is like a boomerang. It's going to come back to us. Just remembering this oxygen mask analogy is enough. You cannot pour from an empty cup. We need to replenish, we need to re-energize, we need to be filling our cup with not just one thing, not just the energy, with love, with kindness, with compassion, with empathy, with lot of energies. All of that, we need to be filling our cup, because we can only give what we have.
This is also another question that a friend of mine asked. So, growing up children in a society where previously issues of sexuality were not, it was taboo. And now I know my own kids are able to actually speak about things like the issues of gender, having friends that may be homosexual or bisexual, those kind of things, sort of taboo in the Indian community to talk about those things. And a lot of people struggle with this. And how do we help out ourselves, first of all, to not have a negative approach to the topic, and how then do we teach our children to be more accepting, and at the same time also ourselves need to be more accepting of that and allow them to be better, I would say, better citizens. Fortunately, the school that my kids go to, I mean, these things are spoken about and my kids are more accepting of it, but we still have that stigma, that difficulty to talk about it.
Great question, especially in this day and age. And we know it is not just about being gay or lesbian. There is a whole lot LGBTQI, yes. And it keeps going on. As a matter of fact, I was kind of exposed to this knowledge 40 years back in US. That made me go so deep. This is one of the things, as a scientist, it is so easy to become spiritual, first religious and then spiritual. It's extremely easy, whether as a scientist or as a medical professional. So there are two ways of handling such an issue. Of course, the clear-cut and easy way is through the medical knowledge. We know that, because it is not about right or wrong. What it is, again, if we try to say this is wrong, it is going to be hidden. And this is not a taboo. This is not a stigma, not just in Indian culture, I can assure you. 40 years back, and even now, few months back when I went to West, there were so many issues about this, both within the family and within the friend circle. They're still struggling how to cope with this, even within the family itself, even between parents. There is a taboo, there is a stigma, and because of this there are such great issues, and the families are broken up because of this. And even as husband and wife, they are being separated because of such issues. And I have dealt with many cases both in India and in UK and in US, and also helped given talks in organizations in India, wherein some of the people who had certain of these challenges, they've gone back to India to start NGOs to bring awareness of these issues, and they've requested me, and then we have given talks to such organizations. The easiest way is to deal through medical knowledge. And another way is, again, Sharlene, I'm going to touch upon it, but not deal with this. We have to deal with this from a different angle. I would like to keep it scientific, that's why. See, our Hindu culture, it is so broad-minded, and not just that, all inclusive. They accept each and everything, and we have mythological stories to depict this. And we don't go deep into understanding the symbolism and significance of our mythological stories, and we only look at it from quote unquote religious perspective, and we lose out on many of the things. Same mythological stories, if we look at it from a spiritual perspective, not from right or wrong, because here again I want to define what I call it as religious perspective. I'm not talking about religious perspective as our leaders talk about, our religious leaders talk about, like Vivekananda. When he talks about religious perspective, for him religion is worldwide religion, it is spirituality. That is what we call spirituality right now in this day and age, what he called religion. But what I'm calling religion is my God, and only my God is the supreme God, and you can only get salvation from my God and nothing else. Whether it is, I'm not just talking about Hindu religion, in many other religions, this is how it, many other faiths, this is how it is. When we broaden our understanding of what is God, and then who is God, we will never get stuck at this level. Again, in our Hindu mythology stories, it's not just mythology, we can let it go. Yes, it's the message feels like it is diluted because it is through stories. It is diluted because anybody can understand. But the message is never diluted. It's always the highest Upanishadic message that is brought into mythology stories, and including Ramayana and Mahabharata, we say that is classified under Itihasa. Not even mythology, but such great symbolism. Until and unless we really go deeper, there is no way we can come out of it. Earlier they used to say, how do I say this? It is lack of knowledge is what is, or ignorance is what is causing all these issues, right? Now it is not even lack of knowledge, it is let me get this straight. I'm missing one thing here. It is the ignorance of the information that we have, not having the right knowledge about the information. I'm trying to bring in the AI into this. In other words, not knowing the... Okay, let me come back. For some reason, it is skipping my mind. I will come back to that sometimes. This is a very emotional issue for me, because whether it is within the family or within the friend circle, for the past 40 years, I'm facing this issue especially. That's why sometimes it becomes like that. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is we cannot be ignorant about the right type of knowledge. We need to educate ourselves properly and at the highest level, which is nothing but making inclusive of everything. In other words, if I just have to bring in the ultimate Advaitic angle to this, we are moving from lower truth to higher truth. So says Swami Vivekananda, which is the Advaitic knowledge. We are not moving from falsehood to truth, but from lower truth to higher truth. So if we can understand this, then it is not about right or wrong in any of the issues. We need to go deeper and understand why this is happening, and to be able to educate whether the kids or the adults to say, to grow from that, to evolve from that, rather than making it as right or wrong. And again, the best way is through medical knowledge. We need to bring this issue. And I think the quote I was looking at was from a Western author. I will try to remember that and then come back to that.
Okay, so I have one more question here with regards to single parents. So those who may have lost their spouses through violence or tragic death, and having to raise children on their own with minimal support and trying to juggle their career, and they try to do the best that they can, but feel that they're failing both themselves and their children.
Yeah. These are great issues. Usually, in general, what happens with parenting, we are always worried about our future of the kids. We obsess about all the things that can go wrong in the future. So we try to bring up the kids in the present moment, trying to safeguard them, trying to protect them. I think if we again come out of the situation, and as we, first of all, we have to have faith in ourselves as parents, whether a single parent or two parents, it doesn't matter. We have to have faith in ourselves, knowing that we are doing the best thing to our parents, which means we need to get educated about parenting in this day and age. So if we have faith in ourselves, we will be focusing on the present moment, not be anxious about the future or worried about the future. Yes, not regret about the past, learn from the past, learn from our parents and grandparents what needs to be done, but how that needs to be packaged, change that in the present moment, and fully believing in ourselves, this is what is going to take my kid the way it should take the kid forward. That we as parents need to be empowered. If we are caught up in the time, in this culture especially, how apartheid times were, and as parents, if we are caught up and then we bring in all that learnings, the anxiety that was associated with our past to the present kids, when things have changed, we will never empower the kids. First, as parents, we need to be empowered. For that, we need to come out of that victim mode and be able to learn to forgive. I'm not talking from a moralistic attitude about right or wrong, but from a scientific perspective, to forgive the perpetrator. the trauma that has caused within the family. So whoever it is, whether it is father or mother bringing up the child as a single parent, or it could be a divorce case, separation case, divorce case, any of that, to learn to forgive the other, not for others' sake, but for our sake. Because then, and only then, can we have a better future if we forgive the past. Extremely important lesson from a scientific perspective, because we have ample evidence to show that an unforgiveness state of mind is associated with many illnesses, including cardiovascular disorders and cancer, and many of the autoimmune disorders. As a hematologist, I don't have to say this. You should be sharing that now with your experience, with your patients, what you have seen. But as a physician, it is going to be hard for you to tell them that you need to forgive. But let me hear your perspective here, Sharlene.
Oh, that's what you say is extremely true. I've interacted with many families that have a person under our care that has a terminal illness, and the entire family issue is brought to bear in the ward with us. And here we are trying to iron out the problem, be it an abusive husband, or I've had people coming in with people having affairs, and the two parties land up in our ward together. There's lots of things that actually we have to go through as doctors, and you realize how this now negatively impacts the person going through that disease process, because obviously the diseases we treat in our unit is these patients will die without treatment. But now they have on their heads hanging this, they're going through a divorce. Where is their child going to be? The father, they feel the father might not be a fit father if that person has to die. So it's really that things that we've actually literally have to work through with these patients, to tell them, listen, if you do not fight for yourself, and here you have this child that you are worried about, that if you do not fight for yourself, this child is going to be left without you. So there's many issues that actually come to bear when people are facing critical illness, and clashing between the spouse and the patient's parents, for instance.
Yeah.
Or so it impacts on the way the person receives treatment. We've had people discharging their children out under our care. So it really does. It affects how the person follows up in the future, health-seeking behavior. And so having a centered, a strong person in your life when you are ill or facing serious illness is really important, because people can be falling apart around you, and it's not good for the person that's dealing with the illness.
Yeah. Through experience, I'm saying for many years now, and especially past 16 or so years, having conducted so many of those support group meetings, including for people, especially for chronic illnesses, and including the caregivers along with that. I'm going to make a statement here, which I have experienced, which is so profound for myself. It's a person can be treated for a disease and can even be cured, but an unforgiveness state of mind, if it is still there, that person is never healed. There is a difference between curing a disease and healing from the disease or an illness. But I can assure you, all of us get cured going to the hospitals. I'm talking about curable diseases now. And then think about illnesses which cannot be cured but can only be healed. It is even more profound there. Diseases can be cured, but with an unforgiveness state of mind, that person can never be healed. But even one person in the family learns the significance of forgiving for oneself, the whole family gets benefited. The whole family gets healed, as a matter of fact. Extremely important for us to understand this difference between curing and healing. We need to be focusing on the healing process.
Yeah, I think for myself, more and more I learned that we in medical school we are taught about the disease process, and very little is taught to us, even as doctors, how to deal with people that are having challenges. That because the observation that I've had, people that come to us with leukemia, it is people that are going through extreme difficult circumstances, and you always think that, gosh, how can one person have a disease that is potentially fatal, and they have all this social problems at home, be it marital problems, severe problems with other aspects of their lives, and then you realize how much of that is driving the cancer in that person, how much of that probably the person has been having over the years, that actually they were unable to cope with it or have the coping mechanisms or the tools to deal with it, that perpetuated this, driving the cancer that they're suffering with.
But this is where, if they focus on healing, and then you can say whatever, the cure will happen on its own with this medicine, but this is the most opportune moment for them to practice living in the moment. And we are taught in medical schools how to increase our globulin levels by whatever medicine, by taking certain foods and whatnot, right? But what we are now talking about with the recent advances in neuroscience research, the same, you can increase your immunity level, you can increase the gamma globulin levels in your bloodstream by forgiving people, by loving people, by being more compassionate, by being more empathetic. This is what we need to bring in. And I'm still struggling to bring in this for people. We have been talking about mindfulness for more than 10 years in India, in our own groups. But this is how, with smaller groups, we are bringing this in. This is what we call this as body-mind medicine. To make people understand, you can increase your immunity level. You can increase your gamma globulin level in the bloodstream by just increasing your healing emotions.
It brings me to another question. One of my colleagues asked me to ask this question because it ties into what you're saying about if you have all these positive, thoughts, and how do you grow up your children to be resilient and to have all these values, and because Maharaj always says he said to us the other day, we don't teach our children about failures. And myself, we spoke about this, you said don't call it a failure, but how do we now empower our children, if you can answer that?
See, whatever I'm saying, Sharlene, it's the old wine in a new bottle. The terminology is different. Whatever I have learned from our Swamiji, who heads the center here, and from our scriptural knowledge from Upanishads. I'm putting different terminology and then saying, um, talking about what our Swamiji says here, you have to prepare the kids for failure. We have to package it in different ways for our kids. What he's saying is for us first to understand, because we don't even know as parents what he's bringing from the scriptural knowledge, but that's all backed by science. He keeps saying that this is what scientific I'm talking about from a scientific angle. How do we package this? Children, they get the logic really well. We need to give a logical explanation for everything for the kids. This is what I have understood. So again, there is a neuroscientist, if I'm correct, in California. She has made a career out of this. Her name is Dr. Carol Dweck. And her whole career is based on understanding mindset. And she says, you should not even put F in the report card. And this is what is being done in West, in US. They don't put F in at least some of the schools. Follow her methodology. They just put not yet, rather than failed in a particular topic. How beautiful it is. How do you build self-esteem? It's not about the kid, it is about the educators, it is about the parents. We need to change our belief system. We are still holding on to the belief system that is pulling us down. Not only pulling us down, we are not inculcating the values in the right way to our own kids. We are not trained to build up the self-esteem and self-confidence in our kids. So as parents, as grandparents, because being a grandparent generation, I have to say this, it's not just about parents. Even the grandparents have to be taught. Otherwise, what do you do as parents? You don't take the kids for grandparents because the way they say it is going to be different. Your kids will get mixed messages. So we try to avoid taking the kids or taking the kids to the grandparents. That is also what I see here. We need to change our belief systems, which is pulling us down. We need to develop a growth mindset and go beyond. We in Yogakshema, the organization that I belong to, we even use the word evolving mindset. And we are educating teachers all over India and principals all over India with these new neuroscientific concepts. Teachers as neurosculptors. Until and unless the educators change their belief system, and we cannot blame the grandparents, we cannot blame the parent generation, we cannot even blame the educators, because what we are discussing are the most recent advances in neuroscience research that I'm bringing it to the people, to the doorsteps of whether it is for parents, grandparents, teachers, kids, professionals, retirees, everyone alike. When we're talking from a scientific angle, the scientific concepts cannot change depending on the age, depending on the socio-economic, educational background of people. How we package it has to change, that's all. And we need to, if we don't even believe and have faith in real science, then I feel we are lost as I'm not talking about just parents, as humanity itself, because there are people who don't believe in God, right? That is okay. I don't have any qualms because I have many majority of my people, friends, and who are very close to me. Either they are agnostics or atheists, but they are great humanists. They are doing so much great work than the religious people in my life. Hats off to them. So as long as they believe in themselves, so that is all I say. If you're believing in yourself, you don't even realize you're believing in God. And they can change like that if we bring in Vivekananda's views about faith itself, right? What does Vivekananda say? The old religion says, if you are an atheist, that means you're not believing in God. The new religion says, what he talks about new religion is nothing but Neo Vedanta or Viveka Vedanta, as I call it, not just the classical Vedanta, classic Vedanta, but Neo Vedanta or Viveka Vedanta, as I say it. The new religion says, one who does not have faith in himself is an atheist. This is the ultimate Advaita Jnana. What else can we get, right? So it is not even not believing in God. If you don't even believe in science, what else is there, right? This is the power of science because it goes beyond borders. And the best part in this day and age is the newest field in neuroscience, positive psychology, is now bringing up issues which were only brought up in philosophy earlier. What is that? Meaning and purpose of life. In fact, when I speak in public, I say to people, don't take me wrong when I use meaning and purpose of life based on my age and my looks. Don't think I'm talking philosophy. I have to say this out in a joking manner. What I'm talking is pure science. Positive psychology is asking, figure out the meaning and purpose of your life. Whatever it is, if we keep asking ourselves, what is the meaning and purpose of life? If you ask that why 5 times, one of the popular self-help gurus has said this. If you ask why 5 times, you ask a why first time, you get an answer. You ask that why again. You ask why for the 5th time, you will get the right answer. And not only will you get the right answer, that 5th time, that answer will be common for each and everybody, I can tell you that.
Questions? Okay, so just some reflections before we close off, and just from some of my colleagues, when I spoke to them about their reflections on their journeys as parents, and some of the thoughts that were sent to me was that I would spend more time in fortifying relationships with my partner, or have gone a long way towards healthy parenting. More often than not, we were at war with each other, or with some miscommunication, or that led to divergence in parenting approaches, which is absolutely not good. So the question I put to them, these were some of the reflections. I should have done less housework and should not have been so OCD about neatness, and, spent perhaps more time. And these are coming from professionals that are obviously working a lot as well. So I think that guilt that we feel as parents as well, where you're not spending that much time with your kids, and then you get home and you're frustrated with your day's work, and then you take it out on the kids. And I think it's just something that, when we talk about mindful parenting, that perhaps we need to step back and work on ourselves, and you talk about that growth mindset, but you have to have it within you to want to do that as well, because we tend to get stuck in our, in our routine, and, so.
to bring in what is growth mindset, Sharlene. It's about, like, what we think, oh, at this age, it's not possible for me to change. And I have a way of looking at things, and I cannot change at this age, is the usual way people say, right? What growth mindset is all about, it does not matter what age, the brain can change. And it's not about the age. We can keep on learning. I always say we have the opportunity. It is not a hopeless statement, but full of hope. We have an opportunity to be evolving, to be transforming ourselves until our last breath. That means we need to be aware that self-awareness has to be heightened, and we have to enjoy the process of learning new things. This is what growth mindset is all about. So again, that is one aspect. There are several. Those questions were loaded. Let me take in just an issue here or there, and then try and see. Yeah. I'm going to hone in on the issue of OCD, especially this is coming from a professional. We have not looked at OCD this way, Sharlene. Again, if it is affecting one's quality of life, we need to get a medical treatment. I am not against medical treatment for anything. I want to make this blanket statement. However, I have helped many people with OCD without medicine. This is where we say this is knowledge about ourselves, knowledge about how this brain works, knowledge about how the mind works, knowing about ourselves and knowing about the partner. Again, because with parenting, first we need to know about each other, first about ourselves and about each other as spouses before we can bring up a child. So coming back, understanding about ourselves, this knowledge, self-knowledge, itself will act as medicine. We can actually come out of OCD, we can actually come out of depression, we can actually come out of anxiety. I have mentioned this many times in many other talks. We have treated depression without medicine, only through this self-knowledge, to be able to help people change their chemical imbalance by changing their thought patterns. And I will leave it at that. We can do the same thing for anxiety. It's nothing but a curriculum of neuroscience curriculum that we have developed, that we can do that. Coming back to OCD, we need to feel good about that. I obsess about certain things. Now we are looking at it as a disease and a weakness now. If we feel good, this is the reason I am being successful as a professional, because of, quote unquote, I'm coining a new term here, OCDistic qualities in me. Just you see what I'm obsessing about, something that it has to be this way. If we feel good about it, then we will be able to. I'll give you my own example. While doing research, I had to do surgery on the brain in small animals. This is also how I got a joint appointment with neurosurgery department in Temple University, right? And so the neurosurgeons would come and say, it is even, I didn't even know, just like a kid, whatever I needed to learn, I would learn and then do it. And then the rats would live after opening up the brain, and then after giving anesthesia, making them come out, all of this. And the neurosurgeons would come out and say, how is it that you're doing, looking through the microscope and then working on the brain of the rats, and even mice also we have done. And then I thought about it because I obsessed about each and every step that I would go through in my brain before I would get into doing surgery in the lab. And we would use the same anesthesia machine that we would use for people at that time. This was an ICU, but in a lab. And again, wearing sterile gown and sterile gloves. This is 40 years back. Uh, I will again share some of the emotional side of this. 40 years back in India, doctors were not wearing sterile gloves in the hospitals. I'm talking about disposable sterile gloves. Couldn't afford in India. And we were not using disposable sterile needles, whereas I was using disposable sterile needles and syringes 42 years back to do surgery on animals. So, and I would obsess about it, and that's how I would, because I didn't have nurses around me, others like a surgeon would have in an OR, in an operating room. So I had to depend on myself to have everything ready. Think about all the metacognition skills, think about everything that can go wrong and have each and every surgical instrument that is available so readily. And of course, when you are so good at it, it spills over at home. This is natural. But I should just say that I was just blessed. Even without knowing any of this, I was able to figure out, again, because of that religious bent of mine, going deeper into our scriptures, somehow it gave me the understanding what was happening to me. To be honest with you, I didn't even know about OCD at that time, but I figured out, and then all I did was to make this as a strength. Even at home, I would do, if I did, I would give an explanation why I'm doing this. And once you know that, you would be able to stop it whenever you had to, but it was never gone to an extreme. It's only about the cleanliness, how either your child or your husband is not as clean as you. It only stayed at that level, not going into an extreme, even to hurt myself. So with such a long story, what I'm trying to say is, mostly people who are highly successful, and especially if they are in the medical field or even in the IT field for that matter now, it is bound to happen because of the precision. We need to be precise. We need to think about all the possibilities that can go wrong and then take care of it. That means you're so good at what you're doing. This understanding itself will help the person, oh my goodness, I don't have to think of it as disease. Now I have to work on. But there is still underlying causes that we can educate the people, go deeper into OCD, and then how we can look at the brain from a quantum perspective. OCD happens because we are looking at the brain is working from a binary perspective. It has only two choices. We need to train our brain to have many different possibilities, the quantum perspective, just like how they are building quantum computers right now. We need to train our brain to see from a quantum perspective view. I think it was a really long answer, but OCD, I get this from so many people. It's such an issue. It not only affects the person, it affects the family members. It breaks the families. It breaks one person's self-esteem, self-confidence. The life can get really affected. That's why it took a little longer time to explain this issue.
So before I conclude, so if you're to give us one tip on how to start being mindful parents, what to do if tonight you go home and you do this every single night, is there any tip you could give people that are watching?
Simple thing, be in the now. Because the present moment is all what we have. And really all what we need. Because if we are focusing on the doing part, the doing can only happen in the present moment. All the obsessing, all the anxiety, the regrets, the planning, not just negative things, even all the positive things, planning, all of that happens at the level of the mind, mental constructs. But when it actually comes to the doing part, can only happen in the present moment. If we are, if we have understood this concept without any doubt, this is the basis for mindful parenting. Learn from the past, plan for the future, but act and be in the now. And that is how we can become human beings. From human doings, we can become human beings. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all that insight and valuable information and advice. With that, goodbye to our online.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste.